Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Jody Wolfborn again here on the Chef Live stream. Today I am joined by Galen Emery, a longtime chef and an awesome coworker. And he's here to tell us a little bit more about security auditing and all the wonderful things that come from the compliance realm. So, well, I think without any further ado, let's just go straight to introducing Galen. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are, your history here at Chef, like how you came to be at Chef, and then maybe we can talk about what you're doing now and
Sure.
And the lessons.
Yeah, I'm Galen Emery. I am our lead compliance and security architect at Chef Software, and I've been here for very close to 6 years now, which is, I think, 3 lifetimes in the DevOps world. I came in to join the inside automation team, the inside solution architect team years ago, actually just the same team that you were on when you started here.
Yep.
And just kind of grew. I spent some time in the federal space. I spent a couple years working in our federal team out in DC, and then I moved to San Diego where it's sunny and warm all the time. And I've been there for the last couple years. And so my current role is as the lead compliance and security architect is to educate our customers on the compliance and security side of the problem. So I focus specifically on our compliance and security product, and I focus on Spec as kind of the main driver for helping customers adopt what we're starting to see DevSecOps.
Yeah,
Right.
Nice. I was just going to say, so you're kind of like a DevSecOps expert here at Chef.
It's always scary to think of myself as an expert, but yes, like that's the structure of the role. That's the what we want to get across is that, look, we as Chef actually are DevSecOps experts. We've been doing this before those terms existed. We did DevOps before DevOps was a term, right?
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things that we've been able to do. And so what we're doing is really putting our focus on that and saying, hey, look, security is really critical, especially in 2020. There's a lot of things going on at the state level that are really important to think about in terms of security and compliance.
Nice. Just to change tracks for like 1 second, let everybody out there in Twitch land know this is unlike last week. This portion is going to be live. As you can see. Woo! So if you have any questions, pop them into the chat, and we're keeping an eye on that. We'll answer those questions live. Galen does have to leave in like 27 minutes, so we'll answer as many questions as we can. But I also have a couple questions to get us rolling. So let's get back to sort of the audit portion of things. So you started out as a solutions architect here, so like helping implement Chef, or helping customers understand the benefits of Chef and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Getting them started, rolling on, implementing it in their own environments and stuff. And now, like through working with federal customers a lot, you kind of have like switched over into the more security and compliance focused side of things.
Well, so that's what we found, right? Is that particularly our federal customers, and even just any of our regulated customers, any of the banks, any of the financials, any of the healthcare companies, insurance companies, all these folks really were using Chef to get that core system state right? To harden the system, usually to like the CIS, or in the federal space, the DISA STIGs, really trying to focus on, hey, how do I make sure that my infrastructure is hardened to the rules that the auditors are expecting me to have, right?
Yeah.
There's a better security best practices that everybody should be following that are more or less stringent depending upon which organization you're in.
Yeah. So like these concerns have always existed, but now and using infrastructure as code, you can kind of eliminate a little bit of the risk, right? But now we're looking more at compliance as code and like automating that process.
Yeah, exactly. So the operations teams that we worked with were really good at hardening their system, but didn't have a great way to communicate that hardened state to their security teams or their audit teams or things like that. And that's really where Inspec came into the play. Say, hey, look, we can give some metadata here, we can give some structure here that gives you the context, auditor, as to why this thing matters, right?
Yeah.
So there's 2 pieces to this. There's the piece of the control itself, which is to say, what is the state of the system? So things like there should be specific permissions on the sudoers file, right? It's an important file, we should harden that to a specific set of rules. Those are pretty well defined.
Yeah.
The other component is, why does the auditor care about that? The auditor is just a person who's a compliance person. They're maybe in PCI or HIPAA. They don't really understand the technical details of the things. So we can put a description in there and say, hey, this thing is important because this file controls who can escalate privileges on the box, right? And that gives us an idea what the attack vector is and what the components are that we're trying to solve for.
Okay, cool. So we do have a question from Sean YJH in the channel, and this kind of ties together with what you were just talking about. Sean is asking, how would you define a hardened system? And it seems kind of like a hardened system would be something that you apply those checks to, and it comes back saying like, yes, I meet all the requirements that you've outlined here. I'm like good to go. I'm a secure system according to your standards. Is that a fairly good definition?
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. So the hardening of the system, what we're talking about there are two major sets of benchmarks that people use. There's the CIS, which is the Center for Internet Security.
Okay.
It's a nonprofit group that publishes this set of best practices. Most organizations, most commercial organizations follow those rules to some degree. Probably not to 100%, but to a pretty large number.
Yeah.
The other one in the federal world is the DISA STIGs, published by DISA, which is a federal entity. Mainly we see that in Department of Defense type places, right?
Okay.
The U.S. military follows that.
Yeah.
And what we mean by hardening the system, what we're saying is there's a set of best practices to ensure that if something were to happen on your box or somebody were to gain access to it, that they'd be unlikely to escalate or privilege themselves into a different state or a higher state, something like that. And what we want to do there is really want to make sure that two things. One, we want to close an attack vector into the box. So things like telnet should not be on. Telnet is inherently insecure.
Yeah.
But we also want to make sure that if somebody is on the box as an unprivileged user or a low privileged user, that we have the ability, that they don't have the ability to escalate those privileges to root.
Okay, yeah. Like, so hardened is a lot about the security standards and enforcing those, as well as just like your general compliance requirements.
Yeah, it's a core requirement, core baseline rule for all audited systems, right? So PCI, HIPAA, SOX, all these things say, hey, your system must be secure to some level. And again, CIS is typically the ones that people use to accomplish that security.
Okay, cool. I wanted to ask you a little bit about like auditing prep, and in your experience working with all of the customers that you have over the last like 4 years or so, in the federal space specifically, what are some of the common like the common barriers that people have to like audit prep, or what are the challenges that people have to overcome? And I think you have something prepared to go through this.
I do.
Is that
I do.
Cool.
Because the question really is kind of, what is an audit proving, right? What are we trying to prove when we're auditing our systems? And there's a couple of components of it that are really interesting in terms of the challenges. And so the first challenge is really the state of the system, right? So what we're trying to say is, hey, is the system in a secure state? Is it in a state that we can trust? And when we're thinking about an audit, we're often thinking about the integrity of a system. So we're saying things like, look, if I have personal information on there, confidential information, nobody can access that who's not supposed to access it, right? No external attacker can, nobody in the company can who doesn't have privilege to it, all those kinds of things, right?
Is that, sorry to interrupt, is the information you're talking about, is that like passwords and keys, or is that like customer, like PCI, credit card information and stuff?
Right.
Oh, okay.
So all the above. So we're talking about there's any sort of information or things that if were released would be damaging, right? So either PII, so the personally identifiable information in like a HIPAA or PCI, like your credit card data, your social security number, your address, your health conditions, all that kind of stuff. Or even just as simple as the passwords used to create the database and manage the database themselves, right? That's also kind of privileged information, right?
Right.
And it needs to be secured such that only the right people have access to it, right? And in some cases, nobody should have access to that. No human should have access to that. We can talk more about that in a little bit. But that's the first thing we're looking for, is the state of the system. Right?
Okay.
The second thing an audit is looking for is, how do we how do we change the system, right? Do we have a secure process that says, hey, Jody can't just log into production and make any change she wants. Jody only gets to make the changes that she's approved to make.
Come on, guys. Like, all my changes are wonderful, though.
I've looked at all your code. It is fantastic. It's not. But the point being is that we have to have a process
Right.
that shows exactly how the system came into the state. And oftentimes this is one of the big hangups in an audit, right? Because if the process is manual, if let's say you are an administrator and you are logging into a box to make a change, you're going to push the new version of the application up or whatever it is. If that's all just you as a human, then we have to document all the process. And usually it means that if you're going to do it, I have to go check your work to make sure that nothing else happened, right?
Yeah.
All these kinds of things. And this is where we get into continuous integration and continuous delivery systems being really effective, right?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, this is where source control and, like, tools like GitHub and GitLab and all that kind of stuff would come into play, right? Like, managing the versions so that you know exactly, like, hey, this was the first set, or this is what it looked like to begin with, like you're talking about the delta. This is what it looked like to begin with. This is what it looks like now. And here's the exact moment in time when this change was made.
Yep, exactly, right? It's exactly the control of that. And the other component to that, which is what you're leading into, is the who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? Which is the, okay, I now have a system for change. How do I prove who made the change, what change it was, when it did, why the change existed, how it was accomplished, and where it went, right? All those things are important to determine the full kind of, again, the integrity of the system. We're trying to make sure that I understand not just the state of the system, how the state got into how it got into that state through the process, and then also being able to document what we call in security the chain of custody, right? All the way back to source code saying, hey, Jody wrote the code or Galen wrote the code, and then somebody else approved it, right? So, Brian approved it, or, Kimball approved it, or whatever.
Right. Okay, cool.
And so the next thing on this is really talking about, so when we're going through this piece of trying to prove this in an audit, right? The simplest approach is for a human to go log into a system and look at the system, right? Particularly what we're looking for here is state. We're trying to prove the current state of the system. And so we do this manually, right? It's a one-time check. It's straight up. It's just kind of what exists in the system at the time. And so all we can do when we're looking at a system manually is just determine if the system is in the state we expect it to be in or not.
Right.
We haven't done anything about proving the delta, proving the change, or who had the approval to do whatever to make the system into that state. We just know if the system's in the current state. So what we typically see, though, in large organizations is that, that's just not tenable, right? You've got thousands of systems or hundreds of thousands of systems. So the next way we typically look at it is by having a human inspect a few systems and make an inference decision on the other ones. So again, typically a manual process, looking at a subset of our systems, and we're looking at one Active Directory controller or one web server, and be like, oh yeah, well we built all the rest of them, they all work, so they're all the same from a security perspective, right?
Totally, yeah.
Right? Wrong. What we find with our customers actually is that there's a lot of ways that customers will game this system to get through an audit. One of the most common ones is if you've got multiple systems doing a job, you might shut down a couple systems. And then when the auditors show up, you're like, well, those systems are offline, so we'll show you Web Server 1 because Web Server 1 is online. And that way we don't have to really think about Web Servers 2 and 3 and 4, right?
Yeah.
I know. It's incredible.
Yeah, that gives you nervous sweats just thinking about going through that kind of audit.
There are so many heebie-jeebies in the compliance and security world. It's incredible. And so, again, this is a one-time view, and this is just, this is, again, untenable. It's not effective in terms of actually proving the state of the system. It's fairly effective at getting through an audit, but as we're seeing, companies are getting hacked every day. They're getting hacked and compromised even when they're not the target. That's a great example of the NotPetya virus in 2017 was one where we believe that Russia released it against Ukraine, and it spread outside of Ukraine and caused $10 billion of damage across the entire industry, including nearly taking down Maersk Shipping. And if you haven't read the article on the Maersk Shipping side of NotPetya, it is a truly terrifying account of just how close one company came to losing their entire infrastructure, and they were saved by a single server that was offline in Zimbabwe.
Jeez.
So the next way we typically work with this is to have a scanning tool go look at systems for us. Right? So a human's looking at a dashboard, and the dashboard has the results of everything the scan goes out and does. The biggest problem with this is it's heavy, right? We are doing an outside-in external scan of our systems, and a lot of things can go right or wrong with that, right? Let's say a firewall is misconfigured in the middle and you can't reach a system, and the scanner is asking the system, hey, are you open on port 80? Well, if the firewall blocks it at a different level, but has a different route to it from the internet, then potentially that system is in fact vulnerable and we're just not seeing it, right? So this outside-in scan is difficult from that side in the first place.
Is that a fall under like penetration testing?
Not quite penetration testing. So penetration testing is very specifically, I'm going to hire somebody whose job is to go hit my website and hit my things and try to break it, right? And so that's where you see things like your injection attacks, you see overflow attacks, things like that, where they're basically trying to, from your externally facing product, they're really trying to break through the way an attacker would. This is much simpler. This is really just saying, look, there's, again, some basic security principles that we should be following. Telnet should not be open and running. Why? Because if Telnet is open, the penetration test will take people about 5 seconds, and they'll be like, cool, I'm in your systems. Awesome, right? And so really this is the structure of like, look, this is, again, just baseline components. And we see some things around like machine learning and AI starting to go show them the compliance and security space. But Verizon's State of PCI report shows us, and we've got some Gartner reports and some information on terms of like security and compliance. Most people just fail at the core system hardening, right? We're not at the spot where really many or any of us need to be thinking about the advanced state level attacks that people might be taking against our systems. It's really simple stuff. 70% or more of breaches are from known vulnerabilities, which is to say the system was known to be vulnerable and the attackers got through because we never patched the system, right? That's the kind of thing that we're trying to prevent against right now.
Right. And when you automate, like when you do entwine infrastructure as code with compliance as code, then you get that ability to build a patching process that's hopefully a little bit easier. Or like if you can't get a patching process, like at least you could tear down the unpatched systems and build up new systems.
Absolutely,
a lot faster.
Right? There's a lot of components in terms of how do we solve this problem, and really speed is actually the first part of the answer, right? I have to have a process that allows me to quickly push a change to production in a secure, fast, safe way, right? And that's really one of the key components that we work with our customers on making happen. And the last thing I want to point out on the scanning component, which is really difficult, is that the way this works is that you have a dashboard that is literally just a human looking at a bunch of information and then making a decision based on that information. One of the things we know is true is that the CIS benchmarks, as an example, are really heavy. If you were to follow them to 100%, your system would be beautifully secure, and I applaud you. It would also be unusable for anything other than as a bug anchor, right? It is just untenable to actually use these things. And so what we want, so what happens there is that the user, the security analyst, the security auditor, whoever, has to sit down and go, okay, well, these systems have these exceptions, these systems don't have these exceptions. So these failures don't matter. I can remove that from my data set, and then I can do all this, and then I can hand this set of data over to Jody and say, Jody, go fix your systems, right? And then you're going to come back and go, actually, I have some exceptions for those, and like this process continues for a long period of time. This is a big part of the audit process and a big part of the security process that really slows people down. And so what we want to do is exactly what you're talking about in terms of defining the compliance as code. So then really the first thing we want to do here is think about what the security policy should be, right? There's a couple of things that need to exist inside your security policy. The first is you have to have an authority. So somebody has to have the authority to define this actual policy.
Right.
And so what I mean by that is that maybe it's your chief security officer. Maybe it's your auditors are going to come in and help you. Maybe it's whoever, right? But somebody has to have the authority in it, and we want to document who the authority is in the policies. So we know who to go talk to, right? If Jody is the person to go define the policy, then great. We're going to go talk to Jody if I have a question about it. The next thing is the actual controls of the policy itself, right? These are the simple things I talked about before: the suitors file, telnet, not listening on port 80. No exec on /temp. On the Windows side, password security minimum requirements, minimum length, right? All those kinds of things are really a part of this. The next thing is the metadata I mentioned before is okay, that's great that the control exists. Why does it matter? If I have a PCI audit that says I must have centralized logging as a component, then let's put that information into the control and say, hey, I put Splunk everywhere. Like I'm looking for the Splunk agent. That's my proof of centralized logging, right? And so we can put that metadata in there as a tag and say, hey, this is the information. This is why this matters from a compliance and audit perspective, not just from a security hardening and security state perspective.
That seems super beneficial from the perspective of like you set up a system where you're scanning your systems. I come along and I'm like, oh, this profile looks like something I could use against my systems, maybe. I just go through now and can like human readably understand what the code you've created is actually doing. So regardless of whether I'm a systems engineer or security engineer, or even like you said, the authority, the person who doesn't necessarily care about the technical side of things, they just care about the rule being enforced. They're like, oh, I don't care about like this code that's being run or whatever it's checking for, but I do care that it says centralized logging. So like, cool, they've checked that box for me, we're good to go.
Yeah, and this is exactly it, right? This is what we think about when we think about the security policy in Inspec. The Inspec profile is really what we're talking about here when we're talking about documenting this policy.
Right.
And we think about it as a shared language, right? There's at least 2, if not 3 teams in any given organization. There's the operations team, there's the security team, and there's an audit or compliance team, right? And the security and audit teams are often different people. Either there's an external auditor or they're actually separate from a separation of duties perspective, particularly in financial institutions, to ensure that nobody's kind of monkeying around with the money type stuff.
Right.
And so like having all these people be able to consolidate on one language, doesn't matter who the owner is. Maybe the audit and compliance team are the owners of the document. Again, they're the authority of it, right? But everybody's going to get the information they need out of it. The operations team is going to see the controls. They're like, oh, I must have Splunk installed. Cool, I'll go write a thing to put Splunk everywhere, right? And the security team is going to say like, hey, look, I see that Telnet's not on, right? Cool, that's the kind of thing that I care about, right? Whatever those pieces are. And the last thing is, you already touched on this, is integrity, right? When I build this policy, when I build this code, I need to have some assertion that this is in fact the thing when I go to run it, right? And what we do with code is it's just a checksum, right? It's a document, but it's code. I can prove that it hasn't changed because math.
Right.
I'm not smart enough to really go into the details of checksums and how they prove cryptographic integrity, but they do.
Maybe in a later episode.
Yeah, we can definitely go into it. But that's the structure of what we're doing there. So we want the authority, we want the controls, we want the metadata, so why those controls matter, and then we're going to need an integrity check to validate that when we run this thing on against the system, that I know it hasn't been monkeyed with or tampered with by anybody in the process.
Cool. So then you get an auditing trail because you're keeping track of the changes through source control and all that good magic. And then you also get like, hey, here is the proof of us being compliant with all of your regulations. Here's how you wrote it. Here's how we wrote it. Are we good to go? And it's a lot faster, it sounds like.
And that's it. Because what we can do is we can run this once, right? If we run this once against one system and we validate that that system is in fact secure, let's say our operations teams build a golden image pipeline, right? They're saying, hey, look, this is the image that you're going to use. This is the hardened system. We can run it against that pipeline. And if it passes, if it validates, then we know that this policy against that image is accurate, right? And as long as we keep running this policy when the system is running in production, we know that the system is accurate to security standards. And what this allows us to do, we talk about this a lot in terms of shifting things left, and we talked about this a little bit, but not explicitly, about the changes in the pipeline, right? The delta in the pipeline, creating the pipeline more accurately, is by shifting these concerns left, as close to the developer, close to the operations engineer as possible, what we can do is we can really reduce the amount of time it takes them to figure out there's a problem. One of the things we don't want to see is that you write code, it goes through your waterfall process, and 2 months later you're about to go to production, and security shows up and is like, you have 250 vulnerabilities you need to go fix now. So go enjoy working on that for 6 weeks, and then come back to us and like, okay, cool, but now you have 42 new ones because a bunch of things didn't get patched in the same process, right? By validating this in real time and as part of our development pipelines, we can get, and this is what we get our federal customers to in particular, is what we call this continuous authority to operate. And the ATO, the authority to operate, is a specific federal term around their rules for pushing a change to production require security to sign off on it. It's called the ATO document. And most of that concern is around, is the system in a secure state or not, right? And because it's such a hard lift to prove that on a regular basis, these things happen very irregularly, and they take a lot of time to do. And what it means is that your development process is slowed down. So this allows us to have customers put these security policy tests into their pipeline. And if they pass the pipeline, then they get to push to production, and they have the continuous ATO. because they've already documented the change management process through the DevOps, through the CI/CD pipeline. They know who's doing what because they have source code management and all the RBAC and all the things around that. They have all that stuff proven, and that's really what allows us to get to the true kind of secure pipeline.
Okay. I don't want to interrupt the presentation. Are you almost, is this done? Because I have a question that goes along with this, but it kind of moves away from it.
I think I have like one more slide here.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Once we've done this once, we can scale it, right?
Yeah.
Because we have the validation that this thing works, because we have the integrity checks, we understand exactly how all this stuff works, and we can run this across any number of systems we have.
Right. So you scan the one system, and now you don't just come out with a report on that system's compliance, and now you know all your infrastructure compliance essentially, but you also come out with a codified document that you can use against other systems.
Correct. I'm going to run against all the systems because I don't trust that any of those other ones haven't shifted on me in a way that I don't expect. Right?
Okay. Yeah. And then this whole thing kind of leads to something I think we were talking about earlier about like explicit trust and implicit trust. You were saying once you can sort of move the audit process left and like move it closer to the developers, then the developers can start to contribute to the system without necessarily a human like enforcing checks and balances on them because they've automated that process. Can you talk a little about like the difference between implicit trust and explicit trust as it pertains to the software development lifecycle?
Sure.
And like, some of the lessons we have there maybe?
Yeah, so what we're talking about is in implicit trust, we're saying, look, I trust the system kind of implicitly, which is to say, I trust the humans in the system, typically is what we're talking about, and saying, look, Jody and I will have access to the production repositories to make changes to them, right?
Yeah.
And when your team is small and the things are small, you don't want to put a bunch of process in place to slow things down, right? Just like, look, use Jody's keys for it. Jody's keys are the ones to make it happen. Like, you know, like that just like it's just like you built it as a proof of concept and it became the thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's,
also, have you read the Unicorn Project? Because everything you're describing is like a perfect description for that book.
I haven't read the Unicorn Project yet.
Good job. You know it very well.
I live it. Turns out. I remember reading the Phoenix Project on a plane and like getting teary-eyed because I'm like, I've been this person. I've been this thing. But yeah, so what we're talking about in implicit trust, we're saying, look, the system is small enough and knowable enough that we can trust it kind of implicitly, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of complexity to it. There's not a lot of things to it. But as you add scale, as you add complexity, particularly as you're adding individuals to software development lifecycle, we need to switch to an explicit trust model. And what we're talking about here, particularly as it relates to Chef software, is we had an incident where somebody removed things from Ruby gems. And the core incident was that humans had access to production data store, in our case, Ruby gems. And humans shouldn't have access when we have hundreds, if not thousands, of developers working on the Chef project, right? And so what we need to switch to is the explicit trust model, which is to say, look, I am going to force every software developer to go through the same process to make a change, which is inside the security process, right? And so they're going to go ahead and submit code to Git. Git is going to go through a secured pipeline, and out of that pipeline goes to an artifact, right? And that way, what we want to have is no individual has direct access to the artifact store, right? We can revert any change we need to because we have all the Git components, all of those things. But also, like, if your keys get compromised and you have production access to the artifact store, that's a problem, right? Doesn't matter what the cause is. What matters is that there are 300 developers, and we shouldn't have 300 developers have access to the artifact store.
Right.
And then every system grabs from the trusted artifact store. And so that's really what we want to have happen there. And so that's the core structure of what I'm starting to call the human-free zone, or the human-free pipeline. I have a talk coming up on this actually at DevOps Talks Melbourne and Auckland.
Ooh, nice.
So I get to spend a lot of time on airplanes.
Oh my gosh, yeah, but you're going down under too, so
Yeah, it's it's a win. It's a win. But the core structure is that humans are really good at building the process, at understanding the complexities of the system, understanding what needs to get done, but we're really bad at doing tasks over and over again, right? And so what we want to do is like, look, let the robots do the job of doing all the tasks again and again. Your job is to write the code, and then let the automation take it over from there.
Right. Okay, we're right up at 10 o'clock, and I know you have an appointment, so if you need to bounce out, that's totally cool.
I can take 2 or 3 more questions.
Okay, cool.
We'll make it happen.
Cool. That's perfect because I have like 2 or 3 more. Okay, so
Serendipitous.
Yeah, we've talked very serendipitous. We've talked a lot about. First, actually, there's a question in the channel about from I'm a Lazy Fox. Hey, asking how does Chef Inspec compare to Ansible? I'll answer that, and then maybe you can build a little bit more off that, and then we'll go back to the sort of auditing questions. So Inspec is a testing framework that allows you to, like Galen has been talking about, scan for the state of your systems, to look at that and build a report based off of that. Ansible allows you to enforce the state of your system. And so Ansible kind of will err more on the side of infrastructure as code, whereas Chef Inspec is compliance as code. And actually that dovetails into perfectly into the next question, which is, so I read the Gartner report that just came out recently. It talks about how organizations that are adopting compliance as code have been able to kind of accelerate their development life cycles and like eliminate risk in their systems. So how have you sort of seen organizations adopting like that compliance as code with Chef Inspec as people are going through and doing that in your experience? Like what are the sort of what are the first steps that they start to do? You kind of walked through it here, but like how do you sort of identify who that authority is, and then know how to move forward from there?
Yeah. So in a large enough organization, the authority is already defined, right?
Okay.
Somebody has the responsibility of dealing with audits and security. And I don't know who they are necessarily, but they're typically going to roll up to a CISO or CSO. Right?
Probably whoever is asking you to prove the state of your infrastructure.
Usually they're the ones who have the authority to determine what that state should look like.
Okay, fair
right?
enough.
And sometimes the operations teams have some sort of authority on that side as well, and things like that. There's a whole exception process that has to happen in terms of what things you are going to turn on or off in terms of the security baseline to make your system work. But yeah, so the first step is like, look, establish who owns it. And if you're not in that team, let's say you're not in that team, one of the easiest ways to do is like the request of work that they give you. When security hands you the list of 300 violations, you just go write the controls that just check for that violation, right?
Yeah.
They say, hey, this setting should have been 4. Then you're going to go write an inspect check that says, hey, I expect the setting to be 4, right? Whatever that thing is. And the easiest way to do it, and the way people typically work with it, is start taking off those high criticality ones, right? When you get back the report from a CIS or from a STIG, there's criticality on the things, right? Certain controls, certain things are small and easy.
Yeah.
But aren't particularly dangerous to the system, right? But like allowing root to log in over SSH is a particularly dangerous control. So make sure that thing is turned off in your SSH config. And so you start taking them off one by one, right? That's the easiest way to start working on it. If you're actually coming up against an audit, it's nice and useful to go and scan your system and look at the entire set of the CIS benchmarks and kind of see where you fit.
Yeah.
But you're going to end up with a lot of information. Unless you have a lot of time to kind of work with, you're going to have a hard time dissecting where do I start in this process. And so again, you're going to have to go one by one and say, I'm going to take this control and I'm remediate it. And as you said, that's where an Ansible could come in. That's where Chef Infra can come in.
Right.
There's other tools in the market as well. But it doesn't, like, from a compliance perspective, like, you're going to have a compliance tool. Its job is to check for the system state. Another tool is your job is to enforce the system state.
Yeah. Oh, you brought up something that I kind of want to highlight. You said the CIS benchmarks. So one thing we haven't really talked about is Chef Automate's like dashboard and the benefits that you get from that. And I don't want this is not a sales pitch or anything, but one of the ways that I've seen customers start to like get their hands dirty with Chef Inspec is through the Automate dashboard, where there are those like I think it's at like 300 now.
395 I think is the number.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
last time I checked it was 287.
Yeah,
and that was
I
like
just
2
keep
months
growing.
ago. Sorry. So there's more than 300 already built out profiles that are based on the Center for Internet Security benchmarks. And so like when you say the next step would be go out and write the profiles or the controls that check your systems. That's actually a lot easier than what it sounds like.
If you're consuming Chef Automate, you have access to those controls already.
Right.
So that's the thing that's part of our commercial product. And again, not a sales pitch, but like we have that content as part of what we provide to our customers.
Right.
And if you don't have that content, then like there's a couple other ways to get to it. There's actually a really good group, the DevSec organization. It's a group founded by some past chefers, and they have a bunch of kind of core baseline content.
Those are in the supermarket, right?
Either in the supermarket, but they also have a GitHub repo.
Oh, nice.
And so there's a wealth of kind of core baseline things. They're not as extensive as the CIS benchmarks, but there are some very simple best practices that if they're not on your systems, I would go fix that immediately.
Right.
And there are things that you should
like telnet and all, and the password link,
and there are things that you should be able to fix and not break anything, right? Like there's a lot of rules in CIS that could potentially break things. A very common example is no exec on /temp, which is just most third-party applications drop into there and execute out of there because it's simple and easy. But if you have that rule set, they'll break, and maybe you need that application for something, right? So the DevSec groups don't have the rules like that. They just have the simple kind of like, hey, no telnet, harden your SSH config. If you have a web server, it should be doing these things, that kind of stuff.
Cool. Okay, I have like one last personal question, I guess. So I follow Galen on the gram. I don't know if you guys are on Instagram as well, but you always post amazing shots of like hikes that you're going on or jogs or runs that you've been on. What is your favorite jog or hike that you've done as you're traveling the frickin' world?
I've had a couple great ones. I think my best was I went for a hike in the Italian Alps in April of last year.
Oh my gosh.
And I had word from my friends who lived in Germany at the time. They're like, hey, it's been pretty warm. It's been pretty wet. Might be muddy and you might get rained on, but like you'll be fine. I showed up into the day I went for my hike. It quickly went from like sort of like heavy rain / mixed snow to full on blizzard.
Oh my gosh.
And so I got about halfway up the hike and I'm into my knees in snowdrifts, and then I decided I'm gonna turn around. But I was the only one on the trail. I'm hiking through the snowstorm. I've gotten the best profile photo I've ever got in my entire life from a selfie I took on that hike. And it was just peaceful and awesome. And like I woke up the next morning and the view from my hotel room was this gorgeous Italian countryside.
Oh my gosh. That sounds
absolutely
amazing.
Fantastic. So that was the best one I did. That was a vacation trip, to be clear.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of customers in Milan for us.
Was there any moment on your hike where you were like, "Oh, this is where I die. I'm gonna die out here in a blizzard in Italy."
When I walked back down the hill, I remember sitting there. I remember walking down and looking like, cool. Every track I had that was less than 6 inches deep is now totally gone. So it would take them until the next thaw to find my body.
Oh my gosh!
I will say though, that is actually the only hike I think I've ever been on where I actually told people and set up all like the safety stuff of like,
smart.
If you don't hear from him by 4 o'clock, call yo, go find my body. Like I am freezing to death on the mountain if you don't hear from me by 4.
Call Italian 911.
Yeah. And then of course I got off the mountain and like my cell phone wasn't working at the moment, so I was like, oh god, I got to get down quickly enough to tell someone that I'm actually safe. I'm actually okay.
Yeah. Oh, we do have one more question from Lit Jace. What up? In Twitch. What does Automate add to Inspec's capabilities? I can answer that, or you can if you want to.
I'll go ahead and sweet. I love hearing myself talk, so happy
we
to.
all do. Yeah. Well, us too.
Automate has a centralized dashboard to report on all the things that that Inspec will show to you. Otherwise, you have to kind of figure out where to get the data, where to put the data, and how to aggregate and look at it. And as Jody already mentioned, we have a large number of controls already built, 395 or so. Different profiles for various system types, various hardening rules, all those kinds of things are part of Automate. Yeah. It also aggregates information from Chef Infra and from Chef Habitat, which are two other open source products as well.
That's right. With the Habitat 1.5 release from our last episode, one of the things that got added into Chef Automate's dashboard was the applications view. So now you can check out your application health as well, which is pretty sweet. Alongside those inspects. So Automate adds a lot to Chef Inspec's capabilities, or adds on top of it and kind of combines it with the other projects and solutions that Chef provides. So good question, Lit Jace. Oh, hey, B Goldie 99. Um, cool. Well,
Cool.
I will let you get to your meeting.
All right.
Tell them I apologize for your tardiness.
It's my fault. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Yep.
While Galen is exiting, I have a couple of links for you. So we mentioned a Gartner report that talks about compliance as code and the benefits that your organization can get from adopting compliance as code. Usually those reports are behind a paywall, but I have Chef Software actually has is going to give you free access to it. So I'm pasting the link in the chat there, and you can follow that link and check out the Gartner report for free. We just, we'll have you fill in your name and information. And then one more thing, I want to talk about what's going on in next week's episode. Nick Rykar, who some of you may know from the community, is going to be hosting next week's show, and he's actually going to be talking about the IAM version 2 release that just occurred recently. He's going to expand a little bit on Chef Habitat and the Chef Automate UI, and then he's also going to talk a little bit about Gartner and expand on that report. So grab the link from the chat, and then you can read up on that report and have awesome questions for Nick next week, and he will answer all of them. I'm sure he loves that I'm promising that for him. The other thing is, as always, check out community.chef.io for all of the upcoming events. We should have Galen's upcoming speaking event. There are a couple of other events that some other chef engineers are going to be speaking at as well. So check out community.chef.io, and I will put that link in the chat as well. Even though Galen is gone, I can still stick around and answer any questions that people might have. So if you are curious about anything, just let me know. Otherwise, we'll probably sign off in about 4 minutes, maybe at 10:15, and I'll stick around until then. If you have any questions, I am working on a Terraform environment for one of our learning tutorials, so you can I probably won't share that because it has secrets in it, and I haven't set up my screen to share on here yet, but you can ask questions and I'll be in the chat and answer. Oh, and it looks like Lit Jace has asked, is there any Learn Chef material related to what we covered? There is a ton of Learn Chef material related to what we covered. So if you head over to learn.chef.io, we have a bunch of various modules, individual modules that you can run through. But we also have tracks that combine all of the sort of auditing and compliance related modules together. So head to learn.chef.io, and you can look at the tracks and search for getting started with Inspec or infrastructure, automation, compliance as code, all that good stuff is in there. And I could probably actually pull up, since we're gonna stick around until 10:15, I can pull up some modules to share with you, as if other people are getting their questions loaded. Here we go. Here is an integrated compliance with Chef. Ooh, nice. Hopefully, so Lit J said they have already started that track a while ago, so hopefully you've gone through and earned the badges that come along with completing tracks in Learn Chef. That's my favorite part about Learn Chef, is that you get stickers and swag and free stuff, because like, who doesn't love free stuff? I do all the time. So yeah, cool. Oh yes. And thank you to Garth, my producer. He just asked about the Unicorn Project. So I brought the Unicorn Project up during my conversation with Galen. And in a couple of weeks, we are actually going to have a little book club discussion. We've got a couple of, we've got an engineer coming on the line. We've got a marketer with a computer sciences degree. So she's crazy smart. She's going to be talking about her experiences, how they relate to the Unicorn Project, and we're just going to have a discussion about the different DevOps practices that are brought up in the Unicorn Project. If you're not familiar with the book, it's by Gene Kim. It is the sequel to a book called The Phoenix Project, which Galen brought up. They are fictional novels that detail, that are allegories for the tech world, and so they're very fun to read because you get to see like characterizations of all of the people that you've worked with before who made your life difficult in your job. But the cool part about them is they also inherently teach you practices that are actually going to be better than what the characters in the book are suffering through. And so you get to sort of see how you might implement those practices in your own stodgy, inflexible organization. So it looks like we're at 10:15, so I'm going to sign off until next week when Nick Rykar is going to take over, and then I will see you again in a couple weeks to talk about the Unicorn Project. So now you have 2 weeks to read it and join us and share your experiences as well. Talk to you later. Bye, y'all.